Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Cheska and this is my September reading wrap up. I'm just gonna pop in real quick to do my September reading wrap up, which I am one day late for because it is currently October 1. This is my stack plus my Kindle. So it's a mix of physical books plus Kindle books. I read a total of 17 books for this month, 9 romance, 7 fantasy, and 1 YA mystery. I don't know why it's just one, honestly. All of the fantasy books that I read are absolutely incredible, show-stopping, amazing. However, most of the romance books that I read this month were abysmal, really misses. So it's not really all that good. I know I read 17 and that is a lot for me, but not all of them were good. Not all of them were great. So I'll start first with the first YA mystery book that I read for this month, and it is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this book is about a girl who is recruited to be a part of a special program for the FBI where they bring in teenagers with special skills to work on cold cases. So after hearing one of my favorite booktubers rave about this series, I finally caved in and read The Naturals. After reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I was very excited to read another YA mystery, but sadly it did not live up to the hype, guys. I know that this is only the first book in the series. There are, I think, 3 more books, if I'm not mistaken, in this series. So it focuses a lot on building the groundwork, introducing the characters, their backgrounds, also introducing the overarching plot of the story. However, I think the biggest gripe I had with this book was that it failed to immerse me into the story. All the casework and training outside of the main story that Cassie and the rest of the crew did were just narrative montages. You never really get to see what they actually do. You never really understand what they actually do in the academy or in the program that they're a part of. The relationships were also very surface level. You never really get on board also with the love triangle because there's nothing in the book that would explain how these 2 boys fell in love with Cassie, our main character. Like literally they come into the page either like already obsessed with her. If you've read the Inheritance Games, that series also suffered the same love triangle trope, the same obsession from 2 boys over this singular girl, and I just don't like it. I'm sorry, it just takes me out of the story every single time they have interactions, and the same happened for this book. Overall, it just never really sold me on the whole Criminal Minds aspect of it, and maybe it will get better in the next 3 books, I don't know, but for this book in particular, I rated it 3 stars, and I'm not sure if I want to continue the rest of the series, quite honestly. Moving on to the 9 romance books that I read for this month. So again, I mentioned earlier that although I read 9 romance books, I actually ended up reading a lot of romance books because I chose such bad ones that I kept on looking for new ones that would redeem itself for me, that would redeem romance books for me. And the first romance book that I read was The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. This is about Rosie, who had to become roommates with her best friend's cousin, a Latino boy called Lucas, whom she had a crush on for forever. Of course, there's a lot of drama also from their personal lives, but that is the main overarching plot. Forced proximity, had to become roommates, had to live in a studio apartment. And when I read the synopsis, and having read The Spanish Love Deception, which I actually really liked, from Elena Armas, I was sold. Honestly, the book was promising on paper. The formula was there: forced proximity, one-sided crushes, and then there's only one bed trope. But I think the main downfall of this book was the cringy dialogue. I cannot, like, there are multiple times I wanted to stop reading because of how cringy the dialogue was. Every single time you read the interactions between the main character Rosie and Lucas, or even like Rosie and other people, or Lucas and other people, the dialogue seems so unreal and so out of character. I don't know. I feel like normal people wouldn't say those things in real life. There are moments wherein it's normal, but there are moments where the dialogue just takes me out of it. And honestly, for those who have also read it, I don't think I'll be able to hear Dulce de Leche the same way again. Like, hear it and not cringe. I don't know. It just ruined, the cringy dialogue just ruined the whole book for me, and I rated it, I think, 2.5 stars. The second romance book I read for this month, I also read on my Kindle, and it is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. This is a very heartwarming romance about a travel vlogger named Vanessa who had to take care of her missing in action sister's baby. And here comes her hot lawyer neighbor called Adrian, who surprisingly has baby pacifying skills and ends up helping her throughout the whole process. Of course, sparks fly when they spend more time, but Vanessa's family actually has a history of ALS, and she has always expected for the disease to take her soon, like how it took all the other women in her family. So this book was such a roller coaster. I'm usually blank faced when reading romance books. Like I just read like okay, but on my face I don't usually show it. But boy am I glad that I read and finished this at home, because I've lost count on how many times I paused reading it just to gasp, just to laugh, just to pout or like squeal or cry and stare at an empty space. If I have to choose one conflict I hate from books, it's the miscommunication trope. But this book executed the miscommunication trope so well, and I didn't know I can say that out loud. This book executed the miscommunication trope so well that it made sense given the situation and given its characters. And I found absolutely no fault for that trope in a book this time around. And for that alone, like me actually liking the miscommunication trope, or like me actually understanding the miscommunication trope, I gave this book 5 stars. And then the third romance book that I read for this month was The Nanny by Lara Ferguson. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But The Nanny is about a girl named Cassie who had to become a live-in nanny to pay her bills. But turns out that the single dad of the kid that she will be taking care of was actually her top fan back when she had an OnlyFans account. So this is such a unique trope, and I actually heard of this book from Larry Reads, whom I have been watching in booktube and watching in booktok for the longest time. And honestly, I blame her. I blame booktok for me having to read this book. But to be honest, this book started out okay. I am a firm believer that rom-coms just need to have the vibes, you know. They just need I just need to feel it. And they can be 5 stars for me. Like they don't need to make sense. They just need to have the vibes and the feels. And it did have the vibes and the feels during the first half of the book. Until the vibes became meh, the feels became like non-existent, and there was nothing to hold on to until the end of the book. I think the vibes just fizzled out at the half marker of the book, and the book is long. I read it on Kindle and it felt long for me. And do you know, like sometimes when you read books on Kindle, you don't even become aware on how thick or how long the book is. But for this specific book, halfway through, I was so surprised that I was just 50% in because of how long it was, and I think how unnecessary some of the scenes and some of the plot points are. It's like the characters were also supposed to be endearing, but I just didn't care, or I was never invested in any of them, or I was never as invested as I should have been, given the lack of plot or given the lack of direction of the story. And yes, that even goes with the male lead, which I usually fall in love with first few pages of a romance book. So I just wish there was something more to hold on to until the end of the book. And that third act breakup, which I hate in romance books, and I know almost all romance books have those, right? But I hate third act breakups, and having that or reaching that third act breakup in a book that I was already so done for halfway through just didn't help the situation at all. I rated this 2 stars also. Now, the fourth romance book that I read for this one, and this is me like trying to grasp at straws and trying to find, at this point, I was on a hunt of another good romance book because I had a bad one with American Roommate Experiment. I had a good one with Life's Too Short, and then I had another bad one with the Nanny. So I was on the hunt for a good one, and I ended up picking up My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. I apologize. And this book is basically, as the title suggests, Cassie, our main girl, renting out a mysteriously cheap apartment only to find out that her eccentric, old beyond his years roommate, Frederick, is actually a real life vampire. So I really, really wanted to love this book. I really wanted to like it so much. The premise sounds amazing. The cover was also amazing. And the first 30% of the book honestly had me hooked. Like I was flying by the pages. The text messages between Frederick and his friend was gold. Like it was hilarious. However, it only went down after the 30% mark. Cassie was a main character insert. I could not tell you any characteristics that she has. She's basically Bella from Twilight. I could not describe her for you guys because she has no description. She has no characteristics as a main character. And there were barely any moments between Cassie and Frederick. And this is a freaking romance book. Like, that is what stumped me, honestly. Like, they're supposed to fall in love with each other, and they fell in love with each other, barely having interactions in the book. And there were no tension nor chemistry at all in those few scenes that they have interacting with each other. Like nada, none. There was absolutely no build up on the romance. So when they got together, I was left wondering why. Why is this happening? How did they end up falling for each other? And why is the story still going on? Like, I don't know. Maybe I was just not in the right mind when I was reading it, but I really, really wanted to love it so much, but I was just disappointed by the end of it. I rated this 2.5 stars. Now, the fifth book that I read was Throttled by Lauren Asher. And honestly, Lauren Asher has quickly become one of my go-to romance book authors. I love her so much. This book is about Formula One racing. Maya Alatorre, our main girl, follows her older brother's F1 tour, and there she meets Noah Slade, an F1 legend, who is also her brother's teammate slash rival. So tension ensues during the F1 tour, and especially between Maya and Noah. And this is a whole will they, won't they love story. It's actually very simple. There's no like main conflict or anything like that, except for the fact that she is or he is her brother's teammate slash rival. And you know what? I read it, and yes, I indeed became an F1 girly because of this book. I am proud of that. This is the cutest thing that I've read in a long while. Again, I am a firm believer that romance books just need to have the vibe, just need to have that feels, right? And this book delivered that. If there's one gripe I had about this book, I'm honestly over male leads having such toxic family dynamics. I gave this book, Throttled by Lauren Asher, 4 stars. And then speaking of Lauren Asher, right after that, since I loved it so much, right, I ended up picking up the last book in the Dreamland Billionaire series that I have been putting off reading, which is The Final Offer. Again, this is the last book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and this follows the Last King brother's story as he tries to fulfill his late grandfather's will to sell their summer home. The only problem is that this brother's, the one that got away girl, actually co-owns the house. So he cannot tell her that the main reason why he wants to sell the home is because it's part of the will so that the brothers can get their shares in the business. He cannot tell her that. So he has to somehow convince her to sell the family home, which she loves so much. I actually have this book right here. As much as I loved Callahan in the first 2 books, he's honestly my favorite Kane brother, like hands down. I can say the same for the female main character. There was nothing wrong with Alana per se, aside from the fact that she feels more like a caricature of a female main character, especially compared to how the first 2 female main characters were, like Iris and Zara. I love them both so much, and then I just feel like she doesn't even deserve him. She doesn't deserve Callahan. And honestly, this book is too thick. Like, do you see how thick that book is? And considering that I didn't actually like the female lead, it's just sad. Like, I had to trudge through all of that in order to emphasize how thick this book is. Let me get the other books. Like, do you see the comparison between this 2 and this? Like, let's compare it with the first freaking book. Like, yes. And then the second book is a bit thicker than the first book, but still, this one is like the thickest. And I mean, having to read this while not liking the female character, it just bums me out. I feel like I don't know, I just feel like we deserved a better female character for Callahan than what we got in this book. And honestly, I'm more intrigued to know about the dad's character arc. Like, the first book never really hinted on how bad the dad was. I think it surprised me the most here how much hateful the dad was. And I was honestly so interested to know more about that arc than anything else. So having this thick of a book and not having that character arc, I just felt disappointed. So I rated this 3.5 stars. But again, Lauren Asher is my new auto-buy romance book author. So whatever she releases moving forward, I will still buy it. So the next romance book that I read was Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is a teen romance comedy YA book about a girl named Liz who gets help from her childhood enemy to make her crush fall in love with her. And slowly, she starts to realize throughout the book that maybe the one has always been in front of her. So, quick confession, I actually DNF'd this last year because I found Liz too unlikable. I just couldn't get on board with her ideals, and that was like the first 20-30 pages of the book. So I stopped reading and I DNF'd it. So I tried to pick it up again because it really does sound good on paper, and a lot of people have been raving about it since last year. Past the halfway mark, I was swooning over Wes. And I loved all of their banter, the times that they hang out together, all the scenes that they have together. I was loving it so much. I was loving it. And I was totally getting the hype. I was on board already up until a certain point in the book. And it was during the last 30, 50 pages of it, where Wes does something that I couldn't get over. Like it was, I think he does something and they never really talk about it. They just glide over it with a conversation and that was it, and they never really hash it out. But me as a reader, I didn't get over it. So unfortunately that part completely destroyed the book for me, and I ended up giving it like 2.5 stars. The next romance book that I read for September was The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This is actually the second book in the Windy City series, and it follows a flight attendant who had to room with her best friend's brother after her fiance cheated on her. Ryan Shea, the best friend's brother, is actually an NBA superstar. In exchange for her rooming with him, he asks for her help to act as his loving girlfriend. And honestly, this was such a surprise read for me. I know this book has gained traction, and that's the whole reason why I picked it up. So many people have been raving about this book, and this is hands down one of the best fake dating sports romance books I've ever read. And this considering I haven't read the first book in the series, and this is like a perfect romance book in my opinion. Again, this is me going back to what I said. A romance book just needs to have that vibes, that feels for me to rate it 5 stars. And honestly, that's it. This book perfectly delivered that. Did I mention that Ryan, the main guy, actually buys the girl a freaking house? Like in this economy, that is the bare minimum, honestly. Yes. So I rated this 5 stars. The last romance book that I read for the month of September was The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This follows single mom Jess who signs up for a genetics-based matchmaking app as a joke, but ends up scoring 98% compatibility, the highest percentage compatibility with one of the founders of the app, who is Dr. River Pena. To help propel the upcoming launch of the app, Jess agrees to go on a series of dates with Dr. Pena, River, to test if the genetic compatibility actually reflects in real life relationships. Basically, to prove if the app or the genetics behind the app is true or not. I bought the Illumicrate special edition for this book, and I mean, look at the cover. That is amazing. The sprayed edges, and then of course the hardback also is so cute. I couldn't resist. This is, I think, the only romance book I had as a special edition. I love honestly the dynamics and the banters are so freaking good, and I'm so mad because this book would have been perfect if it wasn't for the ending for me. Again, this is similar to what happened with Better Than the Movies when I was reading it. I was loving it so much until a certain point in the book. I found that the female lead ended up forgiving the male lead super quickly without any thought at all. And I say, honestly, let them grovel until the end of the book. I wish he let him grovel, and this would have been a 5-star read for me. Instead, because of her forgiving him too quickly, I rated this 3.75 stars. Moving on to the fantasy books that I read this month, I read a total of 7 fantasy books, and I love them all so much. So let's get started. So the first fantasy book that I read this month was The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. This is a world where zombies litter the world. Heart is a marshal tasked to kill the zombies, while Mercy, our female lead character, was the Undertaker, basically a mortician who prepares the bodies of the dead killed zombies afterwards. See, their bickering, their banters are so freaking good. This is an enemies to lovers book, and I was hooked from the start. And what they don't know is that despite their animosity in real life, they are unknowingly falling for each other on paper. So they actually exchange letters anonymously. They write letters to each other without knowing that they are writing letters to each other. I know what you're thinking. This sounds exactly like Divine Rivals, and it does. I mean, this game like last year, Divine Rivals was just released a few months ago. But honestly, if you like the letter writing aspect of Divine Rivals, I think you will love this even better. This is a book I will rate above Divine Rivals. It's a romantasy at its core, but you get to know both Heart and Mercy as people outside of their romance. the tension in this book is top notch, absolutely top notch. And there's even like a who did this to you, and there's even like this guy running through everything just to save this girl, like everything. It's so tropey and it's so good. I highly recommend it. This is one of my favorite reads of the year so far. 5 freaking stars. Now, the next fantasy book that I read is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. This is about Evie Sage, and Evie is a very, very good assistant. It's just that her boss is not that good, meaning he is evil slash the villain to be exact. This is a TikTok viral series turned novel about the sunshine assistant and her evil villain boss and their totally unexpected whirlwind romance. So I discovered the author's video series in TikTok, then immediately rushed to order this book. I would say that it's very apparent that the author is a debut author. Like there are pacing issues, there are some editing issues, honestly. But it was a solid fun time. Like if you pick this up just wanting to get the premise, just wanting that sunshine assistant slash evil villain boss vibes that you got from the TikTok videos, you will get it. It will deliver. But again, there are like some points to be made about like the pacing and the editing issues. But overall, it was such a fun read. I rated this 3.5 stars. Then the next fantasy book that I read is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. So this is a Regency romantasy story about a girl named Theodora who has lived her whole life without her emotions as a result of a fae like cutting her soul and taking her half of her soul. That's why it's called Half a Soul. So she ends up accompanying her cousin to like the London season, in Bridgerton and all. And she ends up getting pulled in to solve this mystery about the mysterious disease going around London. And also at the same time, tries to solve her own mystery of if ever she will still be able to get back half of her soul. So I felt like I should have read it during October. But you know what? No regrets. This is such a good, cozy read. It's like burrowing into a fluffy blanket in front of a fireplace in the middle of winter. I honestly loved the resolution at the end, and the characters are all endearing. And usually, even though I usually don't like Regency books, or I usually don't like Regency eras in books, I surprisingly found this very, very easy to read. I rate this 4.25 stars. Now, the next book I read through Kindle is called Powerless by Lauren Roberts. It follows a girl in a world where being ordinary is actually illegal, and Payden Gray, our female main character, has been able to hide her lack of powers in the slums for the longest time until a chance encounter with one of the prince of the kingdom. Um, and she ends up having to be a part of this Hunger Games like competition that is held to showcase the contestants' powers. Of course, this poses a very big problem for Payden, our main character, because again, she doesn't have powers. So she ends up having to figure out how to survive the contest by using only her wits and skills, pretending to have powers all the time, while trying very, very hard not to fall for the two princes in this kingdom, both of whom were trained from childhood to kill ordinaries, her kind. So I haven't read such a hard pounding, fast paced book in a long, long time. I miss the adrenaline in reading these kinds of books, and I was hooked from start to finish. I found out about this book from Sarah, one of my favorite booktubers, and I absolutely loved it. Definitely one of the few books where the love triangle did not take me out of the book. Like honestly, it had such good formula and it was just fun read all throughout. I gave this 4.5 stars. Now the last book, the last series that I read for the month of September was the Prison Healer trilogy by Lynette Noni. And yes, I was able to finish the first, second, and third book for the month of September. I was so proud of it. And I only have the physical copy for the second book. It's the Fairy Loot special edition. I read the first and third book through Kindle. So this book is about Kiva Meriden, who has spent most of her life trying to survive the kingdom's most notorious prison. And she is there as the prison healer. However, that all changes when Kiva is forced to partake in a series of deadly trials as she tries to save the captured rebel queen. With newfound allies, Kiva tries to subvert the death sentence and try to figure out also how to earn her and her friends' freedom out of the hellish prison. So I don't know why I waited so long to read this series, but boy, am I glad that I had the next book ready, or the series until the end ready to read after reading the first book. The series took the word subversion and executed it to the maximum it can be executed. It really took the time to make you invested in all of the main characters and introduce and make you love all of the side characters as well. but it really, really does pay off by the end of everything. I actually love that the focal point of the story was really Kiva, and it made the impact of the last part, especially the last part of the first book, cut so much deeper. I rated the first book 4.5 stars and the second and the third book 4 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I would totally recommend it for any YA fantasy readers out there. Like, I feel like this is a must read if you want to pick up a YA fantasy book. So that is it for my September reading wrap up. I read a total of 17 books. That is a lot considering my pacing. And there are a lot of books that I want to read for October, and I just hope that I have time to read all of them. Again, see you next time, and thank you for watching.